The call came at 10 p.m., shattering 3 months of careful distance. Luca Moretti, once the most feared name in the city's underworld, stood frozen as the hospital administrator's voice cut through the silence. Your wife has been admitted. She's unconscious. 4 months pregnant. Ex-wife, he wanted to correct. The divorce papers he'd signed to protect her felt like they were burning in his pocket. He'd thought distance would save her from the war brewing in the shadows. Instead, it had nearly killed her. Tonight, every choice he'd made to keep Elena safe would be proven catastrophically wrong. If you're ready to witness a crime boss discover that power means nothing without the ones you love, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches. The Metropolitan General Hospital smelled like disinfectant and dying flowers. Luca Moretti walked through the emergency entrance with the kind of purposeful stride that made people instinctively step aside, even though none of them knew who he was anymore. 3 months ago, that wouldn't have been the case. 3 months ago, his face commanded respect or fear in every corner of this city. Now he was just another man in an expensive suit, racing toward a room number that had been texted to his phone by someone he didn't recognize. Room 347. His driver, Marco, followed at a respectful distance, hand resting near the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Old habits. Luca had spent the entire 20-minute drive from his downtown penthouse in silence, staring at the message that had upended his carefully controlled world. Elena Rossi, admitted 9:47 p.m., unconscious, malnutrition, dehydration, approximately 16 weeks pregnant. Rossi, not Moretti, because she'd taken back her maiden name the day the divorce was finalized, the day he'd told her it was over, the day he'd lied to her face and said he didn't love her anymore. Luca's jaw tightened as he turned down the corridor toward the ICU. A nurse looked up from her station, her professional smile faltering slightly as she took in his presence. The cold authority in his dark eyes, the barely contained violence in the set of his shoulders. I'm here for Elena Rossi, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. The nurse glanced at her computer screen. Are you family? I'm her husband. Sir, our records show... I'm her husband, Luca repeated, each word carved from ice. Something in his tone must have convinced her not to argue. She stood straightening her scrubs nervously. Room 347, but visiting hours are... Luca was already walking. He found the room at the end of the hallway, the door slightly ajar. For a moment, just one suspended breath, he couldn't make himself cross that threshold. Because once he saw her, once he confirmed that his choices had led to this, there would be no more pretending that the divorce had been the right decision. Marco cleared his throat softly. Boss? Luca pushed open the door. The woman in the hospital bed looked nothing like the Elena he'd left 3 months ago. That Elena had been vibrant, elegant, always moving with an unconscious grace that made him want to protect her from everything dark in his world. This Elena was frighteningly still, her skin pale against the white hospital sheets, IV lines running from her arms. Her collarbones were too prominent, her cheeks hollow. But it was her hands that broke something in Luca's chest, thin fingers resting on the slight swell of her belly, even in unconsciousness protecting the life growing inside her. His child. Cristo, he whispered, the curse falling from his lips like a prayer. A doctor entered behind him, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too much human suffering to waste time on pleasantries. Mr. Moretti? Luca turned, and the doctor's eyes widened slightly. She knew who he was, or who he'd been. How long has she been like this? His voice was carefully controlled, but the doctor heard the dangerous edge beneath it. She was brought in by ambulance around 9:30. A neighbor found her collapsed outside her apartment building. The doctor moved to Elena's bedside, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, anemia. She's 4 months pregnant and hasn't been receiving any prenatal care. Mr. Moretti, when was the last time you saw your wife? 93 days ago. He didn't have to calculate. He'd counted every single one. The doctor's expression shifted, professional neutrality giving way to something harder. In the past 3 months, Ms. Rossi has lost approximately 20 pounds. She's been living in a studio apartment in Riverside, one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. According to the neighbor who called 911, she's been working double shifts at a diner trying to make rent. Each word was a knife between Luca's ribs. That's impossible, he said, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. The settlement. The account I set up. She should have had... What settlement? The doctor's voice was sharp now. Mr. Moretti, your wife, ex-wife, has been living below the poverty line. The only reason we were able to admit her is because she qualified for emergency Medicaid. Luca's mind raced, cold fury replacing shock. The settlement had been $2 million, transferred to a secure account in Elena's name the day the divorce was finalized. Enough to ensure she'd never want for anything. Enough to keep her safe, comfortable, free from his world. Except she'd never received it. Someone had stolen from her. From him. Someone in his own organization had betrayed them both. I need to make a call, Luca said, his voice deadly calm. The doctor opened her mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. 5 minutes. She needs rest. Luca stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone. Marco positioned himself by the door, ensuring privacy. The call was answered on the first ring. Dominic, I need you to trace a transaction. $2 million, transferred to Elena Rossi's, account on November 15th. I want to know where it went, who touched it, and I want names in the next hour. Boss, I thought you were out of... 1 hour, Dominic. He ended the call and stood there in the fluorescent hospital lighting, watching Elena through the window. She looked so small in that bed. So fragile. This was the woman he'd married 5 years ago in a small ceremony that had scandalized both their families. Her respectable middle-class parents horrified that their daughter was marrying a man with blood on his hands. His associates convinced that love was a weakness that would get him killed. They'd been right, in a way. Love had made him weak. 3 months ago, when Vincent Calabrese had started making moves against Luca's territory, when the whispers of war had started circulating through the 5 families, Luca had made a choice. He'd pushed Elena away, divorced her, cut her out of his life completely. Because he knew what men like Calabrese did to the families of their enemies. He knew that the fastest way to destroy a man was to hurt the people he loved. So he'd hurt her first. He'd told her the marriage was a mistake, that he'd grown tired of playing house, that she was holding him back from what he really was. A criminal, a killer, someone who belonged in the darkness. The look on her face when he'd said those words would haunt him until the day he died. But she'd be safe, he'd told himself. She'd hate him, but she'd be alive. Except she'd been anything but safe. His phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Found something. You're not going to like it. Luca called him back immediately. Talk. The money was transferred out of Elena's account 6 hours after it was deposited. Routed through 3 shell companies, but I traced it. Boss, it went to an account controlled by Anthony Marino. Luca's blood turned to ice. Anthony Marino, his own cousin, his second in command, the man he'd trusted to manage his financial operations while Luca had stepped back from day-to-day leadership, trying to create distance between himself and the organization that had defined his entire adult life. Where is he now? The warehouse on 5th. He's meeting with the Calabrese crew in an hour. Of course he was. The betrayal went deeper than stolen money. Anthony had been feeding information to Calabrese. The divorce, the settlement, Elena's vulnerability, all of it had been part of a larger plan to destroy Luca from the inside out. Send Victor and the others to the warehouse, Luca said, his voice empty of emotion. Tell Anthony I want to see him. Tell him it's urgent, family business. Boss, if you're coming out of retirement, I'm not. This is personal. He ended the call and returned to Elena's room. The doctor had left, but a nurse was checking the IV line. She glanced at Luca nervously. Is she going to wake up soon? He asked. Hard to say. Her body's been through significant trauma. We're keeping her sedated for now to let her system stabilize. The nurse hesitated. Mr. Moretti, she's going to need extensive care, nutritional support, prenatal monitoring, probably bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy, and she'll need somewhere safe to recover. The apartment where she was living won't be an issue, Luca said flatly. She'll have everything she needs. The nurse nodded and left him alone with his unconscious ex-wife and the child he hadn't known existed until an hour ago. Luca pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, reaching for Elena's hand. Her fingers were cold, delicate in his rough palm. Once she used to wake up and find him watching her sleep, and she'd smile and call him her beautiful monster, the only person who'd ever seen past the violence to whatever humanity he had left. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you hate me, you'd be safe from all of this. But I was wrong, Elena. I was so goddamn wrong." Her chest rose and fell with steady, monitored breaths. "Someone stole from you, from us. Someone I trusted." His hand tightened around hers, carefully gentle. "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure you never want for anything again. And the people who did this," his voice dropped to something barely human, "they're going to understand exactly what it costs to hurt what's mine." Marco drove him to the warehouse at midnight. The building was one of several properties Luca still owned through various shell companies. Officially, he'd stepped away from the family business, but certain assets remained under his control. Insurance, he'd called it. Now he was grateful for his paranoia. The warehouse was dark except for a single light in the back office. Luca could see shadows moving behind the frosted glass. Anthony would be there, probably reviewing the latest shipment manifests, pretending to be the loyal lieutenant managing operations in Luca's absence. Victor met them at the side entrance. He was a wall of a man, 6'4", and built like he wrestled bears for fun. He'd been with Luca since the beginning, since the days when they were both young and stupid and trying to carve out territory in a city that didn't want to give them anything. "He's inside," Victor said quietly. "Doesn't know anything's wrong. We made sure the Calabrese meeting was canceled, told them there was a problem with the venue." "Good. Anyone else in there?" "Just Tony and 2 of his guys. We've got the building surrounded." Luca nodded and walked toward the office, Marco and Victor flanking him. The old, familiar feeling settled over his shoulders. The cold focus that had made him one of the most effective enforcers in the city before he'd risen to leadership. Violence, when necessary, was a tool. He'd always been exceptionally good at using it. He pushed open the office door without knocking. Anthony Marino looked up from the desk, surprise flickering across his face before he masked it with a smile. He was younger than Luca by 5 years, handsome in a slick way that made people trust him. That had always been his gift. People liked Anthony. They confided in him. They shouldn't have. "Luca, I didn't know you were—" Anthony's smile faltered as he took in Luca's expression. "Is everything okay? Where's my money, Anthony?" The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Anthony's 2 associates started to reach for their weapons, but Victor and Marco were faster. 2 guns appeared, aimed with professional precision. "Hands on the desk," Victor said calmly. "Nobody needs to die tonight if we all stay smart." Anthony's men complied, and Anthony himself spread his hands in a placating gesture, that familiar smile still fixed on his face. "Luca, I don't know what you think—" $2 million, Luca interrupted, walking slowly around the desk. "Transferred to Elena's account on November 15th, transferred out 6 hours later. Want to tell me where it went?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." Luca's voice was soft, almost gentle. That's when Anthony should have been most afraid. "I've known you since you were 16 years old, Tony. I taught you everything about this business. I know when you're lying." Anthony's jaw tightened. "You walked away, Luca. You chose her over the family, and then you divorced her anyway. You left us vulnerable. Someone had to step up. So you stole from her? You left my pregnant ex-wife to starve in some shithole apartment in Riverside?" "I didn't know she was pregnant." Luca moved faster than anyone expected, grabbing Anthony by the throat and slamming him against the wall. The carefully controlled violence finally found its release. "She almost died tonight," Luca said, his voice a razored whisper. "She collapsed from malnutrition. She's been working herself to death while you've been stealing her money and selling information to Vincent Calabrese." Anthony's eyes widened. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't protect what's mine even from a distance?" Luca tightened his grip, watching Anthony's face turn red. "You betrayed me. You betrayed her. You violated every rule we have about family." "She's not family anymore," Anthony choked out. "You divorced her. You said she was a weakness." Luca released him, letting Anthony collapse against the desk, gasping for air. I lied, Luca said simply. I was trying to protect her from the war Calabrese was planning. But you made sure she couldn't access the money that was supposed to keep her safe. You blocked her calls when she tried to reach me. You isolated her, left her with nothing. I was trying to protect the organization. By stealing? By conspiring with our enemies? Luca's laugh was cold. No, Anthony, you saw an opportunity. You thought with me distracted by the divorce, with Elena out of the picture, you could position yourself to take over. You thought you could sell me out to Calabrese and walk away with both my money and my territory. Anthony didn't deny it. There was no point. What are you going to do? He asked quietly. Luca considered him for a long moment. Once he would have killed Anthony without hesitation. Betrayal of this magnitude demanded blood. But something had changed in him over the past 3 months. Or maybe seeing Elena in that hospital bed had reminded him what he was really fighting for. You're going to transfer every penny you stole back into Elena's account, Luca said, with interest. And then you're going to leave the city, tonight. If I ever see you again, if I ever hear that you've contacted anyone in this organization, if your name ever crosses my desk for any reason, I will kill you. That's not a threat, Anthony. It's a promise. You're letting me go? I'm giving you a chance Elena never got. Don't waste it. Victor escorted Anthony out, along with his 2 associates. Marco stayed behind, watching Luca carefully. You've changed, boss. Maybe. Luca sat down in the chair Anthony had vacated, suddenly exhausted. Make sure the money's transferred within the hour, and send word to the 5 families. I want a meeting. You're coming back? No. But they need to understand that Elena and our child are untouchable. Completely. Anyone who moves against them answers to me. Marco nodded. What about Calabrese? If he was working with Anthony, I'll handle Calabrese. Luca pulled out his phone, staring at the dark screen. But first, I need to be there when Elena wakes up. It took 3 days. 3 days of Luca sitting in that hospital room, leaving only when absolutely necessary. He had food brought in, conducted business from his phone, and waited. Elena's condition improved slowly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The IV nutrition was helping, and the baby's heartbeat remained strong. But she stayed unconscious, her body recovering from months of deprivation. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, her eyes finally opened. Luca was reading a report on his tablet when he heard her soft gasp. He looked up to find Elena staring at him, confusion and fear warring in her dark eyes. Luca? His name on her lips felt like absolution and damnation all at once. You're safe, he said immediately, setting aside the tablet. You're in the hospital. You collapsed 3 days ago. Elena's hand moved to her stomach, panic flaring across her face. The baby's fine, Luca assured her quickly. Strong heartbeat. The doctors say with proper care and nutrition, there shouldn't be any complications. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her mind working, trying to piece together why her ex-husband, the man who'd brutally ended their marriage 3 months ago, was sitting vigil at her bedside. Why are you here? Her voice was hoarse from disuse. Because you're carrying my child. You didn't know about that when you divorced me. No, Luca admitted. But I should have known you'd never stop being my responsibility, whether we were married or not. Elena's laugh was bitter. Responsibility. Is that what I am to you? Elena, you told me you didn't love me, she said, and there was such pain in her voice that it physically hurt to hear. You told me I was holding you back, that you needed to focus on your real life without the burden of playing house with me. Every word he'd said during that last conversation came back to haunt him. He'd been so convinced that cruelty was kindness, that pushing her away was protection. I lied, Luca said quietly. About all of it. Elena went very still. What? Vincent Calabrese was planning a move against my territory. He was going to use you to get to me, kidnapping, torture, worse. I divorced you to take you out of the equation. If we weren't married, if I publicly cut you out of my life, you wouldn't be a target. So you destroyed me to save me? Elena's voice shook with fury. Do you have any idea what these past 3 months have been like? I lost everything, Luca. Our home, our life, my sense of who I was. I had to move to Riverside, work double shifts just to afford rent in a place with rats and broken locks. I was alone and terrified, and her voice broke. And I thought you just stopped loving me. Never, Luca said fiercely. Not for 1 second, Elena. Everything I did was to protect you. You stole my choice. You decided what was best for me without even asking. Tears streamed down her face. And the settlement you supposedly left me? I never saw a penny of it. My accounts were frozen. My calls to your office went unanswered. I tried to reach you, Luca. I tried so many times. I know. The weight of his failures pressed down on him. My cousin Anthony betrayed us both. He stole the settlement money and blocked your access to me. He was working with Calabrese. Was? He's gone. The money's been returned to your account. And Calabrese, Luca's voice hardened, is going to understand what it costs to threaten my family. I'm not your family anymore, Elena said, but there was less certainty in her voice now. Luca moved closer to the bed, careful not to crowd her. You're the mother of my child. That makes you family in every way that matters. What I did was wrong, Elena. I was trying to protect you, but I ended up nearly destroying you. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for the truth. Why should I believe you? She asked finally. Why should I trust anything you say? Because I'm not asking you to, Luca said. I'm going to prove it, starting now. The meeting of the 5 families took place in a neutral location, a private room at the Bellingham Hotel, one of the oldest and most prestigious establishments in the city. Traditionally, these gatherings were reserved for major territorial disputes or significant changes in leadership. Luca's request for an emergency council had raised eyebrows across the organization. He arrived exactly on time, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marco and Victor flanked him, but they waited outside the conference room. This conversation needed to happen between equals. The room fell silent when he entered. Vincent Calabrese sat at the head of the table, a thin smile on his weathered face. He was in his 60s, gray-haired and distinguished, the kind of man who looked like he should be running a Fortune 500 company rather than a criminal empire. Beside him was his son, Marcus, younger, hungrier, more violent. The other 3 family heads were already seated. Teresa Giordano, the only woman to hold leadership in their world, sharp-eyed and calculating. James Chen, who controlled most of the city's eastern territory. And Roberto Santos, the youngest of the council, who'd inherited his position when his father was killed 5 years ago. Luca Moretti, Vincent said, his voice smooth as silk. We heard you'd retired. I had, Luca replied, taking the empty seat across from Vincent. But recent events have brought me back to the table. Your wife's unfortunate situation, Teresa said, not unkindly. We heard she was hospitalized. I'm glad to know she's recovering. Ex-wife, Marcus Calabrese interjected with a smirk. Isn't that right, Luca? You divorced her to protect your business interests. Luca's gaze locked on Marcus, and the younger man's smirk faltered. There was something in Luca's eyes that reminded everyone in the room why he'd been so feared during his active years, a coldness that suggested violence was always just beneath the surface, waiting for permission. Elena Moretti is carrying my child, Luca said calmly, which makes both of them untouchable. I wanted to make that clear to everyone here. Remarrying already? Vincent asked, moving rather quickly. Whether we're married or not is irrelevant. What matters is that you understand anyone who moves against Elena or my child will face consequences, personal consequences. James Chen leaned back in his chair. Luca, with all due respect, you stepped away from active leadership. You can't claim territory or protection without... I'm not claiming territory, Luca interrupted. I'm stating a fact. My family is off limits. Completely. This isn't negotiable. And if someone doesn't agree with your terms, Marcus challenged. What then? You going to go to war over a woman you already threw away once? The table went silent. Luca stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. Marcus, your father and I have had our differences over the years, but I've always respected Vincent as a businessman and a leader, which is why I'm going to give you a chance to take back those words before I respond to them. Vincent's expression hardened, but he said nothing, watching, calculating. Marcus, young and stupid, didn't back down. I don't take orders from retired has-beens. Luca moved faster than anyone expected, crossing the distance to Marcus in 2 strides. He grabbed the younger man by the collar and slammed him face first into the conference table. The crack of Marcus's nose breaking was loud in the quiet room. My family, Luca said softly, holding Marcus down with one hand, is not your concern, not your business, not your target. If I hear that you've so much as looked in Elena's direction, if I hear you've driven past our home, if your name comes up in any context related to my wife or child, I will kill you. Not an organization, not a crew, just me, you, and everything you have to lose. Do we understand each other? Marcus made a muffled sound that might have been agreement. Luca released him and straightened his jacket, turning to face the rest of the table. No one moved to help Marcus, who was holding his bleeding nose and glaring with impotent rage. The same goes for anyone else in this room, Luca said. I want a unanimous vote. Elena Moretti and our child are granted complete protection under council authority. Anyone who violates that protection faces sanction from all 5 families. That's not how this works, Vincent said coldly. You can't just walk in here after months away and demand council protection without what, Vincent? Without leverage? Luca smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. I know about the waterfront development deal you're working on with the mayor's office. I know about the shipping routes Chen's been using to move product through the harbor. I know that Teresa's been quietly buying up properties in the theater district for development. And Roberto, he turned to the youngest council member. I know your father's killer is still alive, living under a new name in Miami. Roberto went pale. I spent 3 months stepping away from active operations, Luca continued, but I didn't stop paying attention. I know where all the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. So when I ask for a unanimous vote protecting my family, what I'm really doing is reminding you that I've earned the right to make this request, and that refusing it would be unwise. The silence that followed was absolute. Teresa was the first to speak. All in favor of granting protection to Elena Moretti and her child under council authority? One by one, hands rose, even Vincent's, though his expression promised that this wasn't over. Unanimous, Teresa declared. Your family is protected, Luca. Thank you. Luca nodded to each of them. That's all I needed. I'll see myself out. He was almost to the door when Vincent's voice stopped him. Luca, a word. The other council members filed out, leaving just the 2 of them. Vincent stood, crossing to the windows that overlooked the city skyline. You embarrassed my son. Your son disrespected my wife. Ex-wife, Vincent corrected. And you can play whatever games you want with council votes, but we both know you're not coming back. You're done with this life. Which means eventually, your protection won't mean anything. Luca considered him for a moment. You're right. I don't want to be in this world anymore. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten how it works. Touch my family, Vincent, and I'll burn your entire organization to the ground. Not because I want power, not for territory or money, just because you'll have given me no other choice. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. The same promise I've kept every time someone tested me over the past 20 years. Luca moved toward the door. Stay away from Elena, and we'll never have a problem. But cross that line. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Abash. Elena was sitting up in bed when he returned to the hospital, looking stronger than she had in days. The doctors had started her on a specialized nutrition plan, and some color had returned to her cheeks. Where did you go? She asked as he entered. Council meeting, making sure you and the baby are protected. Protected from what, exactly? Luca pulled a chair close to her bed. The truth? From people who might try to use you to get to me. From the violence that's always circled my life. From ever feeling unsafe again. Elena was quiet for a moment. The doctor told me I can be discharged tomorrow. They want me on bed rest for at least 2 weeks, and I'll need regular monitoring, but you'll stay at my penthouse, Luca said immediately. 24-hour security, private chef, anything you need. Luca, I can't just... You can, he interrupted gently. Elena, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I did, but please, let me do this. Let me make sure you and our child are safe and cared for. And what happens after the baby's born? Elena asked. Do you walk away again? Decide we're better off without you? No. The answer was immediate and absolute. I'm not walking away. Not ever again. Whatever you want from me, whether it's co-parenting, friendship, or... He hesitated. Or something more. I'm here. For as long as you'll have me. Elena's hand moved to her stomach, that unconscious protective gesture he'd seen even when she was unconscious. I don't know if I can trust you, she said finally. You broke my heart, Luca. You made me believe I wasn't enough for you. You were always more than enough, Luca said, his voice rough with emotion. You were everything. That's why I had to push you away. Because in my world, the things you love most are the things your enemies target first. Then maybe you need to change your world. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Maybe I do, Luca agreed quietly. Elena looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied something, because she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll stay at the penthouse, but Luca, no more lies, no more making decisions for me. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to figure out how to be parents together, then you need to be honest with me about everything. I can do that. And I want to know what happened to the settlement money. I want to know who took it and why. Luca hesitated, then nodded. My cousin Anthony stole it. He was working with Vincent Calabrese trying to destabilize my position. He's been dealt with. Dealt with how? He's left the city. He won't be coming back. Elena studied him. Did you kill him? No, I let him go. Why? Because I'm trying to be the kind of man who deserves a second chance with you, Luca said. And that man doesn't solve every problem with violence. Something shifted in Elena's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Okay, she said again. We'll try this. But Luca, if you ever lie to me again, if you ever push me away to protect me without giving me a choice in the matter, we're done. Permanently. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Elena settled back against the pillows, exhaustion catching up with her. Now, tell me about this penthouse. Does it have a bathtub? Because I haven't had a proper bath in 3 months. Luca smiled, a real smile, the first genuine expression of happiness he'd felt since the divorce. It has a bathtub, and a view of the city, and more bedrooms than any reasonable person needs. Sounds excessive. You haven't seen excessive until you've seen my closet. Elena laughed, soft and tired, and Luca felt something in his chest crack open. Hope, maybe. Or just the beginning of healing. Tomorrow, he'd bring her home. Tomorrow, they'd start figuring out what their new life looked like. Two broken people trying to build something whole for the child they'd created. But tonight, he sat with her in that hospital room, holding her hand as she drifted off to sleep, and made a silent promise to the family he'd almost lost. No more lies. No more distance. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Even if it meant completely rewriting everything he'd ever known about power, loyalty, and what it meant to be Luca Moretti. The empire could wait. His family came first. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of the city. Elena stood in the living room the next afternoon, still weak but steadier on her feet, and stared out at the skyline she'd once called home. It hasn't changed, she said quietly. Luca set down her small suitcase, the only possession she'd brought from the Riverside apartment, and moved to stand beside her. Did you want it to? I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself, conscious of how threadbare her clothes looked in this space of polished marble and designer furniture. Part of me hoped that when I left, this place would disappear, that it would turn out to be a dream I'd wake up from. And the other part? Elena turned to face him. The other part missed it every single day. The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. Luca wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and promise that she'd never have to miss anything again. But he held himself back. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. Your room is down the hall, he said instead. The master suite. I've been staying in one of the guest rooms. Elena's eyebrows rose. Luca, this is your home. I can take a guest room. The master suite has the bathtub you wanted, and the better view, and... He hesitated. It was our room, Elena. It doesn't feel right for me to be in there without you. She studied him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. The man who'd shattered her world 3 months ago? Or the one who was desperately trying to piece it back together? Show me, she said finally. He led her down the hall, past the guest rooms and the office where he'd spent countless nights handling business he could no longer walk away from entirely. The master suite took up the eastern corner of the penthouse, all clean lines and soft grays, with a king-sized bed that faced the windows and the sunrise beyond. Elena walked to the bathroom, a space of white marble and chrome, with a deep soaking tub positioned beneath a skylight, and her breath caught. I used to spend hours in here, she said, trailing her fingers along the edge of the tub. Reading, thinking, just existing in a space that felt peaceful. I know. I'd come home and find you asleep in the water, book still in your hand. Luca leaned against the doorframe. Scared me half to death the first time. I thought you drowned. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You pulled me out so fast you soaked your suit, that ridiculous Tom Ford three-piece you loved. Worth every penny if it meant you were safe. The smile faded. You always wanted to keep me safe, even when it meant destroying us. Elena, I'm not trying to start a fight, she interrupted, turning to face him. I'm just trying to understand. You say you pushed me away to protect me, that you thought the divorce would make me less of a target. But Luca, if someone wanted to hurt you through me, a piece of paper wouldn't have stopped them. They could have come for me whether we were married or not. She was right, and he'd known it even 3 months ago. But fear had a way of making even smart men stupid. Vincent Calabrese's father once kidnapped the girlfriend of a rival boss, Luca said quietly. This was before my time, back when the old guard still ran things. He kept her for 3 days, sent pieces of her back to her boyfriend, one at a time. By the time they found her, she'd lost her mind. She spent the rest of her life in an institution. Elena's face paled. That's the world I come from, Luca continued, where the people you love become weapons against you, where showing weakness means inviting destruction. So yes, I thought a divorce would help. I thought if everyone believed I didn't care about you anymore, you'd be worthless as leverage. But someone still came for me anyway. Not in the way I feared. Anthony's betrayal was different. He wanted to isolate me, make me vulnerable by cutting me off from resources and support. You were collateral damage in a larger plan. Luca's jaw tightened, which doesn't make what happened to you any less my fault. Elena moved closer, and he caught the faint scent of the hospital soap she'd used that morning, clean and antiseptic. Nothing like the jasmine perfume she used to wear. I need you to promise me something, she said. Anything. Don't protect me from your world by hiding it from me. If there's danger, I want to know. If someone's making moves against you, I want to be informed. I can't make good decisions if you're keeping me in the dark. Elena, some of the things I deal with are part of who you are, she finished. I knew what I was getting into when I married you, Luca. My parents warned me, my friends told me I was making a mistake, but I chose you anyway, because I loved you. Because I believed we could build something real together, despite everything. And I threw that away. You made a choice based on fear instead of trust. Elena reached up, her hand hovering near his face, but not quite touching. Don't make that mistake again. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw Victor's name. I need to take this, he said apologetically. Elena nodded. I'll start unpacking. He stepped into the hallway, answering the call. Talk to me. We've got a problem, Victor said without preamble. Marcus Calabrese has been running his mouth since the council meeting. He's telling anyone who will listen that you're weak, that you only showed up to protect your ex-wife because you can't let go of the past. Luca closed his eyes. Of course Marcus was. The younger Calabrese had an ego the size of the city and a broken nose to nurse. How bad is it? Bad enough that some of the younger crews are starting to listen. They see you as retired, out of touch. Marcus is positioning himself as the future, saying the old ways of doing business are dead. Oh, let him talk. Words don't concern me. Boss, he's doing more than talking. We just got word that he's planning something for Friday night. Some kind of public demonstration to prove he's not afraid of you. Luca's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of demonstration? We're still gathering intel, but it sounds like he wants to make a move in your old territory. Send a message that your protection doesn't mean anything anymore. He wouldn't be that stupid. He's young, angry, and his father just watched you embarrass him in front of the entire council. Yeah, boss, he absolutely would be that stupid. Luca thought fast. Marcus making a move in his territory was one thing. That was business, the usual jockeying for power that happened in their world. But if Marcus decided to involve Elena to prove a point about Luca's supposed weakness. "Double the security on the penthouse," Luca ordered, "and I want eyes on Marcus 24/7. Every move he makes, every person he talks to, I want to know about it." Already done. But Luca, if he's really planning something, you might need to respond with more than surveillance. I know. Luca glanced back toward the master suite, where Elena was probably trying to make herself at home in a space filled with ghosts of their former life. But I'm trying to do things differently this time. Different how? I don't know yet. But I promised Elena no more lies, no more making decisions without her, which means if Marcus becomes a real threat, she needs to know about it. Victor was quiet for a moment. You really love her. More than anything. Then protect her the right way this time. Keep her informed, but keep her safe. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. After ending the call, Luca stood in the hallway for a long moment, weighing his options. The old Luca would have already been planning Marcus's downfall, orchestrating a response that would make the younger man regret ever speaking his name. But that approach had cost him everything 3 months ago. He found Elena in the bedroom, attempting to hang her few clothes in the massive walk-in closet that had once held her extensive wardrobe. She looked small and lost among the empty shelves and bare hangers. "We need to talk," Luca said. She turned, reading something in his expression. "What happened?" "Marcus Calabrese is planning to make a move. My people aren't sure what yet, but it's happening Friday night." He moved into the room, maintaining distance but staying close enough that she could see his face clearly. "I'm telling you this because I promised honesty, but I need you to understand that this is the reality of my life. There will always be someone like Marcus, someone young and ambitious who thinks they can take what's mine. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet. The old me would have crushed him immediately, made an example that would echo through the organization for years. But that kind of violence..." He shook his head. "I'm trying to be better than that. For you, for our child." Elena sat down on the edge of the bed, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. "Luca, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you can't completely change who you are overnight, and I'm not asking you to." "What are you asking?" "For balance. For you to handle threats without becoming the monster you think you need to be." She met his eyes. "There's a difference between protecting your family and drowning in blood to prove a point. You make it sound simple. It's not. But nothing about us has ever been simple." Elena gestured to the empty closet. "I had 3 outfits in that Riverside apartment. 3. Everything else I owned was sold or left behind when I had to move. This closet used to be full of clothes I'd collected over 5 years of marriage. Designer dresses, shoes, bags, all gone. I'll replace everything. Whatever you want, whatever you need. I don't want things, Luca." Her voice cracked slightly. "I want stability. I want to know that when I wake up tomorrow, you'll still be here. That you won't decide I'm safer without you and disappear again." He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere. I swear to you, Elena. Whatever happens with Marcus, whatever business I have to handle, I will come home to you every single night. Promise me something else. Anything. Promise me that you'll tell me when things get dangerous. Not to scare me, but because I deserve to know what we're facing." Her fingers tightened around his. "I can't live in ignorance anymore, waiting for the other shoe to drop." "I promise." She studied his face, searching for the truth in his words, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Then tell me everything. Who is Marcus Calabrese? Why does he hate you? And what exactly did you do at that council meeting?" So Luca told her. He explained the structure of the 5 families, the delicate balance of power that had kept the city relatively peaceful for the past decade. He described Vincent Calabrese's ambitions, the way the older man had been positioning himself to take over territories that had historically remained neutral. And he detailed the council meeting, leaving nothing out, including the moment he'd slammed Marcus's face into the conference table. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You broke his nose," she said finally. "Yes, and in front of his father and the other family heads." "Yes." "Luca, you do understand that completely humiliated him, right? In your world, that kind of public embarrassment demands a response." I know, but he disrespected you, called you a woman I'd thrown away. I wasn't going to let that stand. Elena's expression softened slightly. So you defended my honor by smashing his face into a table. When you put it like that, it sounds less noble. It sounds exactly like you. She shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. My violent, protective, impossible husband. Ex-husband, Luca corrected quietly. You took back your maiden name, remember? About that. Elena pulled her hands from his and stood, moving to the window. The divorce papers say we're not married anymore. But Luca, we're having a child together. We're living in the same home. You just told a room full of crime bosses that I'm under your protection. What exactly are we? It was a fair question, one he'd been avoiding asking himself because he was terrified of her answer. What do you want us to be? He asked carefully. I don't know. Elena traced patterns on the glass with her finger. 3 months ago, I would have done anything to have you back. I would have forgiven you instantly, convinced myself that love was enough to overcome anything. But now, she turned to face him. Now I know what it feels like to lose you, to believe I wasn't enough. And I don't ever want to feel that way again. You won't. I'll make sure of it. You can't promise that. Because the truth is, Luca, as long as you're involved in this world, there will always be another threat. Another Vincent Calabrese or Marcus or whoever comes next. And every time that happens, you'll have to choose between your family and your empire. I choose you, Luca said immediately. Every time, without question. You and our child. But can you really walk away from all of this? From the power, the control, the life you've built? It was the question that had been haunting him since he'd seen her in that hospital bed. Could he truly leave behind the only world he'd ever known? Give up the empire he'd spent 20 years building? I don't know, he admitted, but I'm willing to try. For you. Elena moved closer, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll the past few months had taken on her body and spirit. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said softly. Just be honest with me. If you can't walk away completely, tell me. If you need to stay involved in some capacity to keep us safe, I'll understand. But don't lie to me about who you are or what you're capable of. I won't. Good. She swayed slightly, fatigue catching up with her. I need to rest. The doctor said I should be sleeping at least 10 hours a day until my strength comes back. Luca guided her to the bed, pulling back the covers. I'll be in my office if you need anything. There's a monitor on the nightstand. Just press the button and I'll hear you. Elena slipped under the sheets, her eyes already closing. Luca? Yes? Thank you. For telling me the truth about Marcus. For not hiding the danger from me. You're welcome. He started to leave, but her voice stopped him. And Luca? Whatever you decide to do about Marcus, be smart. Our child needs a father who's alive, not a martyr who died proving a point. He looked back at her, this woman who'd somehow managed to see past his violence to the man beneath, and felt something shift in his chest. I'll be smart, he promised. I'll be careful, and I'll come home to you. She smiled faintly and let sleep take her. Luca returned to his office and pulled up the security feeds from around the city. His network of informants and surveillance was still intact, even after 3 months of reduced involvement. Old habits and older loyalties meant that information still flowed to him, whether he officially led the organization or not. He found Marcus Calabrese at a nightclub in the Warehouse district, surrounded by young men who hung on his every word. Even through the grainy security footage, Luca could see the arrogance in the way Marcus moved, the confidence of someone who'd never truly faced consequences for his actions. His phone rang. Dominic. I've got details on Marcus's plan, Dominic said without greeting. He's organizing a hit on one of your old warehouses. Friday night, like Victor said. He's bringing 20 guys. Maybe more. Plans to burn it down, steal whatever inventory's inside, send a message that your territory is up for grabs. Which warehouse? The one on Porter Street, the pharmaceutical distribution center. Luca's jaw tightened. That warehouse held legitimate medical supplies that were distributed to free clinics throughout the city, one of the few operations he'd maintained that actually helped people rather than exploited them. It was also worth over $10 million in inventory. He knows what's in that warehouse? That's the point, boss. He burns it down, he proves you're weak, and he costs you money and reputation. 2 birds, 1 match. Luca leaned back in his chair, mind racing through options. He could fortify the warehouse, turn it into a trap that would catch Marcus and his crew red-handed. He could call in favors with the police, have Marcus arrested before he could make his move. Or he could do what the old Luca would have done, meet violence with overwhelming force, ensure that Marcus Calabrese never threatened anyone again. But Elena's words echoed in his mind. Our child needs a father who's alive, not a martyr who died proving a point. Set up a meeting with Marcus, Luca said finally. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Boss, you sure that's smart? After you broke his nose, I'm not going to kill him, Dominic. I'm going to talk to him. There has to be a way to handle this that doesn't end in blood. And if talking doesn't work, then we'll revisit our options, but I have to try. After ending the call, Luca sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus Calabrese was planning destruction. And here, in this penthouse, Elena was sleeping, trusting him to handle the threat without becoming the monster she'd married and divorced. The question was whether those two things could coexist. The man who protected his family and the man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, or whether in trying to be both, he'd end up being neither. His phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Meeting set. Marcus agreed to talk. Tomorrow night, neutral ground. Come alone. Luca stared at the message for a long moment before typing his response. Agreed. But I'm bringing one person with me. Victor's reply came quickly. Who? Luca hesitated, then typed, my wife. The response was immediate. Are you insane? Maybe he was. But if Elena wanted honesty, if she wanted to understand his world and be part of the decisions that affected their family, then she needed to see it firsthand. Not from a distance, filtered through his explanations and omissions, but up close and unvarnished. He found her still sleeping when he checked on her an hour later. She looked peaceful, one hand resting on her stomach, protecting their child even in dreams. The sight of her like that, vulnerable but strong, damaged but healing, made him more certain of his decision. Tomorrow night, Elena would meet Marcus Calabrese. She'd see the kind of men who inhabited Luca's world, the threats that would always exist as long as his name carried weight in the city's underworld. And then she'd make her own choice about whether she wanted to stay, knowing full well what that decision meant. No more protecting her from the truth. No more decisions made in isolation. They were in this together now, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death did them part. Even if the marriage license said otherwise. Elena woke to find Luca sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her with an intensity that would have unnerved her once. Now it just felt familiar, like slipping into a rhythm they'd danced to for 5 years before everything fell apart. How long have you been there? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. An hour, maybe 2. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I need to talk to you about tomorrow night. She pushed herself up against the pillows, fully awake now. What about tomorrow night? I've arranged a meeting with Marcus Calabrese. Neutral territory, just him and me, supposed to talk through this situation before it escalates. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want you to come with me. Elena stared at him. You want me to meet the man who's threatening you? The one whose nose you broke? Yes. Luca, I'm 4 months pregnant and barely out of the hospital. What possible reason? Because you asked me not to hide my world from you, he interrupted. You said you wanted to be informed, to understand the dangers we're facing. Well, this is it. This is what my life looks like when things get complicated. And if we're going to build something together, if we're going to raise our child in this reality, you need to see it with your own eyes. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, processing his words. You're testing me. No, I'm including you. There's a difference. Is there? Because it sounds like you're trying to scare me away by showing me the worst parts of your world. Luca stood and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass against the city lights beyond. 3 months ago, I made decisions about our life without consulting you. I decided you'd be safer if we divorced, that distance would protect you, that ignorance was a kindness. And look where that got us. He turned to face her. I'm not making that mistake again. So yes, I want you at this meeting. I want you to see Marcus Calabrese and understand exactly what kind of threat he represents. And then I want you to help me decide how to handle it. Help you decide. Elena's voice rose slightly. Luca, I don't know anything about handling territorial disputes or managing criminal enterprises. What could I possibly contribute? Perspective, clarity, a moral compass that hasn't been corrupted by 20 years of violence. He crossed back to the bed, sitting on the edge. You asked me earlier if I could walk away from this world. The truth is, I don't know. But I do know that every decision I make from now on should consider what kind of man I want to be for our child. And I can't figure that out alone. Elena reached for his hand, studying the scarred knuckles that had broken more bones than she wanted to count. If I go to this meeting, if I meet Marcus face to face, what happens? Do I just sit there quietly while you two talk? You do whatever feels right to you. Sit quietly, ask questions, tell us both we're idiots. I don't care. I just want you there so you understand what we're dealing with. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing the request against her own exhaustion and fear. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay in the safety of the penthouse and let Luca handle his business the way he always had, but that approach had nearly destroyed them both. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. But Luca, if this meeting goes wrong, if it turns violent, it won't. Marcus agreed to neutral ground, no weapons, no crews, just a conversation. You really believe he'll honor that? Luca's expression hardened. He'd be stupid not to. Victor and my people will be watching from a distance. If Marcus tries anything, he'll regret it for the rest of his very short life. Elena shivered at the casual way he spoke about violence, the matter-of-fact tone that suggested killing was just another business decision. This was the reality she'd signed up for when she married him, the truth she'd tried to forget during their years together. What should I wear to a meeting with a crime boss? She asked, trying for lightness. Something comfortable. We're meeting at a restaurant in Little Italy, family-owned place that's been neutral territory for decades. It'll be public enough to keep things civil, but private enough to talk freely. Little Italy. Elena laughed, the sound slightly bitter. Of course. Are we completing the entire Mafia stereotype checklist? Elena. No, it's fine. It's just... She shook her head. 3 months ago, I was eating ramen in a studio apartment, and now I'm getting ready to sit down with criminals in some Italian restaurant like I'm in a movie. My life is completely surreal. Luca squeezed her hand. If you don't want to go, you don't have to. I meant what I said about including you, but I'm not going to force you into situations that make you uncomfortable. Everything about this makes me uncomfortable, Elena admitted. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. You're right. I need to understand your world if we're going to raise a child together. I can't keep my head in the sand anymore. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You're braver than you know. I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave. The next day passed in a strange limbo. Elena spent the morning resting, her body still recovering from months of deprivation. Luca worked from his office, making calls and checking in with his various operations, but he emerged every hour to make sure she ate, to bring her water, to simply sit with her in comfortable silence. It felt almost normal, like the early days of their marriage when they'd been learning each other's rhythms. Except now there was a weight to every interaction, a consciousness that this peace was temporary, built on foundations that could crumble at any moment. That evening, as Elena prepared for the meeting, she stood in front of the closet and felt the absence of her old life acutely. All those designer clothes, carefully curated over years, gone. Sold to pay rent, left behind in the hasty move to Riverside, vanished as completely as her marriage had. She settled on the least worn of her 3 outfits, black pants that were slightly too loose now, and a simple gray sweater that hid how thin she'd become. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, hollow-cheeked, exhausted, a shadow of who she'd been. You look beautiful, Luca said from the doorway. Elena met his eyes in the reflection. You're a terrible liar. I'm an excellent liar. I'm just not lying now. He moved into the room, holding a small box. I had something delivered this afternoon. I thought you might want it for tonight. She turned as he opened the box, revealing a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a compass rose, the same one he'd given her on their first anniversary. I thought I sold this, Elena whispered, reaching for the necklace with trembling fingers. You did. to a pawn shop in Riverside. I had someone track it down yesterday. Luca lifted the necklace from the box. You told me once that it reminded you that no matter how lost we got, we'd always find our way back to each other. I thought maybe you could use that reminder tonight. Elena turned so he could fasten the clasp, feeling the familiar weight of the pendant settle against her collarbone. When she faced the mirror again, she looked a little more like herself. Thank you, she said quietly. Ready? She took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. The drive to Little Italy took 20 minutes through evening traffic. Marco drove while Victor sat in the passenger seat, both men alert and professional. Elena sat in the back with Luca, watching the city pass by the tinted windows. Tell me about this restaurant, she said, needing to fill the silence. Antonelli's. Been in the same family for 4 generations. The owner, Giuseppe, he's old school, believes in the sanctity of neutral ground. No business gets conducted at his tables without permission, and nobody's stupid enough to break that rule. Why not? Luca smiled faintly.
Because
Giuseppe has connections that make the 5 families look like amateurs. He's everybody's favorite uncle, the one man in the city that nobody wants to cross. So we're safe there. As safe as we can be anywhere. The restaurant occupied a corner building in the heart of Little Italy, its red awning and warm windows promising comfort and tradition. Marco parked down the street, and Victor got out first, scanning the area before opening Luca's door. All clear, boss. Marcus arrived 10 minutes ago with 2 guys. They're waiting inside. Luca helped Elena out of the car, his hand firm at the small of her back. She could feel the tension in him, the coiled readiness of someone prepared for violence, even in a supposedly safe meeting. Giuseppe himself greeted them at the door, a rotund man in his 70s with kind eyes and flour on his apron. Luca, figlio mio, it's been too long. Giuseppe embraced Luca warmly before turning to Elena. And this must be your beautiful wife. Elena, yes? I remember your wedding. What a celebration that was. Thank you, Giuseppe. It's good to see you again. Come, come. I have your table prepared. The Calabrese boy is already here, looking like someone stuck a lemon in his mouth. Giuseppe's eyes twinkled with mischief. You did that to his face, Luca? He was disrespectful. Ah, youth. They never learn until someone teaches them. Giuseppe led them through the restaurant, past tables filled with families and couples, to a private room in the back. You need anything, you call me directly. And Luca, no violence in my restaurant. Your father knew that rule, and so do you. I remember, Giuseppe, just a conversation tonight. The old man nodded and left them at the door to the private room. Through the frosted glass, Elena could see shapes moving, Marcus and his companions, waiting. Luca turned to her, his hands on her shoulders. Last chance to wait in the car. I'm not waiting in the car. If things get heated, if the conversation turns ugly, I need you to stay calm. Don't react, don't engage unless you want to. Just observe. I understand. He studied her face for a moment longer, then nodded and opened the door. The private room was intimate, decorated in the same warm Italian style as the rest of the restaurant. A single table dominated the space, set for 4 with white linens and wine glasses. Marcus Calabrese sat at the far end, flanked by 2 men who looked like they spent their days lifting weights and breaking kneecaps. Marcus's nose was swollen and bruised, taped across the bridge where Luca had broken it. The sight should have satisfied some primitive part of Elena, but instead it just made her sad. This was what Luca's world looked like. Broken bones and threatened violence, men marking territory like animals. Moretti, Marcus said, not standing. His eyes slid to Elena with undisguised curiosity. You brought your ex-wife to a business meeting? I brought my wife, Luca corrected, his voice cold. And you'll address her with respect, or this conversation is over before it starts. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Mrs. Moretti, apologies for any previous disrespect. Elena inclined her head slightly, not trusting herself to speak. Luca pulled out a chair for her, then sat beside her, angling his body so he was between her and Marcus. You wanted to talk, Marcus said. So talk. I wanted to give you a chance to reconsider your plans for Friday night, Luca replied calmly. The warehouse on Porter Street. You burn it down, you're not just hitting my operations. You're destroying medical supplies meant for free clinics throughout the city. People who have nothing to do with our world will suffer. Since when do you care about collateral damage? Marcus sneered. You built your empire on broken bodies and ruined lives. Don't pretend you're some kind of humanitarian now. I'm not pretending anything. I'm telling you that this move accomplishes nothing except proving you're willing to hurt innocent people to make a point about me. The point is that you're weak. You walked away from leadership, divorced your wife to save her from the business, and now you're trying to play house while the real work of running this city happens without you. Marcus leaned forward. You're a ghost, Moretti. A memory of what power used to look like. Elena felt Luca tense beside her, but his voice remained level when he spoke. If I'm such a ghost, why are you so desperate to prove you're not afraid of me? I'm not desperate. I'm ambitious. There's a difference. Ambition without wisdom is just recklessness wearing a nice suit. Marcus's face flushed with anger. You broke my nose in front of the entire council because I spoke the truth. You did throw her away. He gestured at Elena. And now you're trying to win her back by pretending to be something you're not. But we all know what you really are, Luca. You're a killer, a monster, and monsters don't get happy endings. The words hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Elena waited for Luca to explode, to reach across the table and finish what he'd started at the council meeting. Instead, he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh or a mocking one. It was genuine amusement, as if Marcus had told a joke instead of hurling insults. You're right, Luca said, still smiling. I am a monster. I've killed men, destroyed lives, built an empire on fear and violence. Everything you said is true. He reached over and took Elena's hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. But monsters can change, Marcus. They can choose to be better. They can walk away from the darkness and try to build something worth protecting. Weakness, Marcus spat. That's all you're showing. Weakness and sentiment. Maybe. Or maybe I've finally figured out what's actually worth fighting for. Luca's smile faded. You want my territory? You want to prove you're the future of this organization? Fine, take it. Burn down the warehouse, make your statement, show everyone that Luca Moretti is finished. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting capitulation. What's the catch? No catch. I'm stepping away. Completely. You want the empire? It's yours. Luca, Elena started, but he squeezed her hand gently. I'm done, Marcus. I'm choosing my family over power. You were right about that. I did throw Elena away once to protect the business. I'm not making that mistake again. Marcus studied him suspiciously. You expect me to believe you're just walking away, leaving everything you built? I expect you to make a choice. You can burn that warehouse, cost people their medical supplies, prove that you're willing to hurt innocents to make a point, or you can take control of the organization and actually do something worthwhile with it. The question is, what kind of leader do you want to be? One of Marcus's companions leaned in and whispered something, but Marcus waved him off, his attention fixed on Luca. This is a trick, Marcus said. You're trying to make me look weak by refusing to fight. I'm trying to give you what you want without more bloodshed, but if you'd rather go to war over pride than accept a peaceful transition of power, that's your choice. Elena couldn't stay silent any longer. You want to know what I think? She asked, her voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. Marcus looked surprised that she'd spoken, while Luca simply waited. I think you're both trapped in this cycle of violence, and you don't even see it, Elena continued. Marcus, you're so desperate to prove you're not weak that you're willing to destroy medical supplies meant for sick people. Luca, you spent 20 years building an empire on fear, and now you're trying to walk away like it's that simple. But neither of you is asking the important question. Which is? Marcus asked, his tone condescending. What are you actually fighting for? Elena met his eyes steadily. Power, respect, territory, those are all abstracts. They don't keep you warm at night. They don't hold your hand when you're scared. They don't love you back. She turned to Luca. You say you're choosing family over empire, but you can't just flip a switch and become a different person. You're still the man who broke Marcus's nose for disrespecting me. You're still the man who threatened to kill his own cousin for stealing money. Violence is still your first language. Elena, sits, Luca started, but she held up her hand. I'm not finished. Both of you need to understand something. I almost died because of the games men like you play with each other. I lost everything. My home, my security, my sense of self. Because Luca thought protecting me meant lying to me. And Marcus, you're planning to burn down a building full of medicine that could help people like me, people who have nothing to do with your stupid territorial disputes. She stood, the movement making her slightly dizzy, but she steadied herself against the table. So here's my perspective, since Luca brought me here to provide it. This meeting is pointless. You're both so caught up in proving who's stronger, who's smarter, who's more ruthless, that you've forgotten what actually matters. People's lives, their safety, their futures. Marcus's face had gone red. You don't understand how this world works. You're right. I don't. But I understand that a world where burning down medical supplies is considered a valid business strategy is a world that's fundamentally broken. Elena looked at Luca. And I understand that the man I married is in there somewhere, underneath all the violence and fear. But he's going to have to fight a lot harder to find himself than he thinks. She sat back down, her heart pounding. She'd never spoken to Luca like that in front of others, never challenged him so directly. But if he wanted her included in this world, if he wanted her perspective, then he'd have to accept what came with it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, Marcus laughed. She's got fire, he said, some of the hostility fading from his expression. I can see why you married her. Twice, Luca said quietly. I married her twice. Once before you were even part of this organization, and I'll marry her again if she'll have me. Elena's breath caught. They hadn't discussed remarriage, hadn't even fully addressed what they were to each other now. But Luca said it like it was inevitable, like there was no question about their future. Marcus shook his head. You really are walking away. I really am. Not because I'm weak, Marcus, because I finally figured out what strength actually looks like. Luca gestured to Elena. She survived 3 months of poverty, worked herself half to death while pregnant, and still had the courage to come to this meeting and tell us both the truth. That's strength. What you and I do, the violence, the intimidation, the constant battle for dominance, that's just fear wearing a tough mask. So what? You're going to become some kind of civilian? Get a normal job, buy a house in the suburbs? Marcus's tone was mocking. I'm going to become a father. I'm going to make sure my wife and child never want for anything. And I'm going to sleep at night knowing I didn't sacrifice my family for an empire that would have forgotten me the moment I was gone. Marcus sat back in his chair, studying Luca with new eyes. And the warehouse on Porter Street? Do what you think is right. If you want to prove yourself by destroying it, that's on you. But if you want to actually lead this organization, if you want people to follow you because they respect you, and not just because they fear you, then maybe consider that some targets aren't worth hitting. One of Marcus's companions leaned in again, whispering urgently. Marcus listened, then nodded slowly. I'll think about it, he said finally. No promises, but I'll think about it. It wasn't an agreement, but it wasn't a declaration of war either. Luca seemed to accept it, standing and helping Elena to her feet. That's all I'm asking. Just think about what kind of leader you want to be. He guided Elena toward the door, then paused. And Marcus, if you do decide to burn that warehouse, make sure you live with that decision. Because the people who depend on those medical supplies, they'll remember. And so will the families who elected you to leadership. They left the private room, Elena's legs shaky beneath her. Giuseppe met them in the hallway, his expression concerned. Everything okay? Fine, Giuseppe. Thank you for the space. Always, Filio, you take care of your beautiful wife, yes? She looks like she could use some of my grandmother's wedding soup. Next time, Elena promised, managing a smile. I'm a bit tired tonight. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. Elena stared out the window, replaying the conversation in her mind. She'd spoken without thinking, letting months of fear and frustration pour out in front of a man who could have her killed without a second thought. I'm sorry, she said finally. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize, Luca interrupted. You were right, about all of it. I have been speaking violence as my first language. I did think I could just flip a switch and become someone different. And you're right that the man you married is still in here somewhere, fighting to get out. Do you think Marcus will really reconsider? I don't know, maybe. He's young and angry, but he's not stupid. If he's smart, he'll realize that burning medical supplies makes him look cruel rather than strong. Luca reached for her hand, But regardless of what he decides, I meant what I said in there. I'm done. Completely. The Empire can burn or flourish without me. Elena turned to face him. You said you'd marry me again. If you'll have me. Luca, we can't just... We have so much to figure out first. The trust issues, the fear, the question of whether you can really walk away from this life. I know. And I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just telling you what I want. What I've wanted since the moment I saw you in that hospital bed. He lifted her hand to his lips. I want to be your husband again. I want to raise our child together. I want to wake up every morning and know that you're there, that we're building something real. What if I can't forgive you? What if I can't forget the things you said when you divorced me? Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning forgiveness. One day at a time, one choice at a time, until you believe that I'm the man I'm trying to become. Elena wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that love could overcome the violence and fear that had defined their lives. But 3 months of poverty and isolation had taught her that love wasn't always enough. Ask me again when our child is born, she said finally. When I've had time to see if you can really keep your promises. When we've both figured out what our lives look like without the Empire defining us. I can do that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, Elena's hand in his, the city lights streaming past like memories of who they used to be. And for the first time since waking up in that hospital, Elena allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Not as the people they were before. Those versions had been destroyed by choices and circumstances beyond their control. But as something new, something stronger, built on honesty instead of protection, on partnership instead of control. The penthouse felt like a sanctuary when they returned, all warm lights and soft furniture. Marco and Victor conducted their security sweep while Luca helped Elena to the bedroom. Rest, he said, pulling back the covers. You've had enough excitement for one night. But Elena caught his hand before he could leave. Stay, just for a while. I don't want to be alone. He kicked off his shoes and stretched out beside her on top of the covers, his arm around her shoulders. Elena nestled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. Do you think Marcus will make the right choice, she asked quietly. I think he'll make the choice that serves his ambitions best. Whether that's the right choice remains to be seen. And if he burns the warehouse anyway? Then I'll have to live with knowing I tried to stop him and failed. But Elena, I'm not going back to that world. No matter what Marcus does, no matter what threats emerge, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing our family. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so desperately, it physically hurt. Tell me about the man you want to be, she whispered. For our child. For me. For yourself. Luca was quiet for a long moment, his hand tracing patterns on her shoulder. I want to be the kind of father who's present. Who doesn't miss bedtimes because of business meetings or school plays because of territorial disputes. I want to be the kind of husband who tells you the truth even when it's hard, who includes you in decisions instead of making them for you. He paused. And I want to be the kind of man who can look at himself in the mirror and not see a monster staring back. That's a lot to want. I know, but I have to try. For you, for our child, for myself. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next step. But Elena was already drifting off, safe in his arms, the compass rose pendant warm against her skin, a reminder that no matter how lost they'd been, they were finding their way back to each other. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one moment of honesty and trust at a time. The question was whether it would be enough. Friday came with unexpected news. Elena was eating breakfast, actual breakfast, prepared by the private chef Luca had hired despite her protests, when Victor arrived at the penthouse with a tablet in hand and an expression she couldn't quite read. Boss, you need to see this, Victor said, setting the tablet on the counter. Luca looked up from his coffee, then gestured for Victor to continue. Elena noticed he didn't send her away, didn't suggest she leave the room while they discussed business. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The tablet showed security footage from the warehouse district, time-stamped from 3 hours earlier. Marcus Calabrese stood in front of the Porter Street warehouse with a dozen men, all of them armed and ready. Elena's breath caught, waiting for the explosion, the flames, the destruction Marcus had promised. But it never came. Instead, Marcus turned to his crew and said something they couldn't hear through the silent footage. One by one, the men lowered their weapons and got back into their vehicles. Marcus stood there alone for another minute, staring at the warehouse. Then he walked away. "He called it off?" Elena whispered. "Called it off, dispersed his crew, and sent word through channels that the Porter Street warehouse is off limits, permanent neutral zone." Victor looked at Luca with something like respect. "Whatever you said to him at that meeting, boss, it worked." Luca was quiet, studying the footage with an intensity that suggested he was looking for a trap. "Has Vincent responded?" Radio silence from the Calabrese family, but Teresa Giordano reached out this morning. "She wants to meet with you, says it's important." "When?" "This afternoon, if you're available." Luca glanced at Elena, and she could see the question in his eyes. He was asking permission, checking if she wanted to be included in yet another meeting with people from his world. "I'll go with you," she said before he could ask. "If that's okay?" "More than okay." He turned back to Victor. "Set it up, neutral ground again, somewhere public." After Victor left, Elena pushed her half-eaten omelet around her plate, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Marcus had backed down. A young man consumed by pride and ambition had chosen restraint over violence. "You did that," she said. "You talked him out of it. We did that. What you said at that meeting about people's lives mattering more than territorial disputes, that might have been what made him think twice. Or he's planning something worse." Luca smiled faintly. "There's the cynicism I was waiting for." "Can you blame me? 3 months ago, I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I understood the rules, and then everything fell apart." "I know." He reached across the counter and covered her hand with his. "But Elena, you need to eat. The doctor said—" "I know what the doctor said. Regular meals, prenatal vitamins, at least 8 hours of sleep. I'm doing all of it." She pulled her hand away gently. "But Luca, I can't just sit here eating gourmet omelets and pretending everything's fine. Marcus might have backed down from burning the warehouse, but that doesn't mean we're safe. That doesn't mean this is over." "What do you want me to do?" It was such a simple question, but the weight behind it was enormous. What did she want? Safety? Normalcy? A life where she didn't have to worry about men like Marcus Calabrese making decisions that could destroy everything. "I want to understand what Teresa wants," Elena said finally. "If she's reaching out directly to you instead of going through official channels, that means something. And I want to be there when you find out what." They met Teresa Giordano at a cafe in the financial district, all glass and steel and power lunches. It was about as far from an Italian restaurant in Little Italy as you could get, which Elena suspected was the point. Teresa was making a statement about her position in the organization: modern, professional, forward-thinking. Teresa herself was in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Elena's entire pre-divorce wardrobe. She stood when they arrived, embracing Luca with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. "Luca, it's been too long." Teresa turned to Elena with a warm smile. "And you must be Elena. I've heard so much about you." "All terrible, I'm sure," Elena said, trying for lightness. "On the contrary, Luca spoke of nothing but you for years. It's why we were all so shocked when you divorced." Teresa gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. I ordered coffee and pastries, though I understand you need to be careful about caffeine right now." Elena settled into her chair, struck by how different this felt from the meeting with Marcus. There was no hostility here, no underlying threat of violence, just 2 women and a man having coffee. "I'll get straight to the point," Teresa said once they'd settled. "Marcus Calabrese backing down from the warehouse situation has created an interesting opportunity. The younger members of the organization are watching to see what happens next. Some of them see his restraint as wisdom. Others see it as weakness." "Which do you see it as?" Luca asked. "Honestly, a bit of both. Marcus showed he could be reasoned with, which is valuable. But he also showed he'll back down when challenged, which makes people wonder if he's really ready for leadership." Teresa sipped her espresso. "Vincent is furious, by the way. He's been positioning Marcus as his heir for years, and now the boy has embarrassed him by choosing peace over power." "That's not our problem," Luca said. "Isn't it? Because Vincent's going to retaliate somehow. He can't let this stand without losing face himself." Teresa leaned forward slightly. "Which is why I'm proposing something unprecedented. The five families have been operating under the same power structure for decades. But Luca, you stepping away has created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. What are you suggesting? A restructuring. Vincent's getting old, his judgment is clouded by pride. Marcus is too young and impulsive. The organization needs fresh leadership, but it also needs stability. Teresa's eyes glinted with something sharp and calculating. I'm proposing that you formally hand over your territories and operations to a council of three, myself, James Chen, and Roberto Santos. We split the power equally, create checks and balances, ensure no single family can dominate the others. Elena watched Luca's face, trying to read his reaction. This was exactly what he'd said he wanted. A way to walk away cleanly, to transfer power without bloodshed. But she could see the hesitation in his eyes. And the Calabrese family? He asked. Vincent retains his current territory but loses his bid for expansion. Marcus either falls in line or finds himself isolated. Teresa sat back. It's not a perfect solution, but it's better than the alternative. Better than war, better than watching the organization tear itself apart over succession. Why do you need my approval? I'm out. What the five families do without me shouldn't matter. But it does matter, Luca. You still have influence, still have loyal people who would follow you over anyone else. If you publicly endorse this restructuring, if you throw your support behind a council of three, it legitimizes the whole thing. The younger members respect you even if they fear Vincent. Elena couldn't stay quiet any longer. What do you get out of this, Teresa? Why are you really here? Teresa turned to her with a smile that was equal parts amused and impressed. Direct. I like that. What do I get? Power, obviously. Real, legitimate power instead of being the token woman on a council of old men. But I also get stability, which is good for business. Wars are expensive and unpredictable. This restructuring ensures peace, or at least the closest thing to peace our world allows. And if Luca says no, then we proceed without his blessing and hope for the best. But it would be easier, cleaner, safer with his support. Teresa looked at Luca. You want to walk away and be with your family. I understand that. I'm offering you a way to do it without leaving chaos in your wake. Luca was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. Elena could practically see him weighing the options, calculating risks, trying to determine if this was genuine or another trap. I need time to think about it, he said finally. Of course. But Luca, I need an answer soon. Vincent's planning something for next week. I don't know what yet, but he's not the type to accept humiliation quietly. Whatever you decide about the restructuring, you should know that staying neutral might not be an option much longer. They finished their coffee while making small talk about nothing important, then said their goodbyes. Elena waited until they were back in the car with Marco driving before she spoke. What do you think? Is she telling the truth? Probably. Teresa's ambitious, but she's also practical. Everything she said makes sense from a business perspective. But? Luca smiled slightly. But there's always something else. Some angle I'm not seeing, some piece of information I don't have. That's how this world works. Everyone's playing their own game, pursuing their own agenda. So what are you going to do? I'm going to talk to James Chen and Roberto Santos separately, see if they're really on board with Teresa's plan or if she's freelancing, and then, he reached for her hand, then I'm going to ask you what you think I should do. Me? Luca, I don't know anything about organizational restructuring or power dynamics, but you know right from wrong. You know when someone's being honest and when they're selling you something. He squeezed her fingers gently. I trust your instincts, Elena, more than I trust my own sometimes. The admission touched something in her chest, a warmth that had been absent for months. He was really doing it, including her, valuing her opinion, treating her like a partner instead of something fragile that needed protecting. Then I think you should find out if Teresa's telling the truth about Chen and Santos, Elena said, and I think you should consider what happens to all those people who work for you if you just walk away without any transition plan. You might be done with the empire, but the empire isn't done with you. Over the next 3 days, Luca conducted his research with the methodical precision that had made him so effective during his years of leadership. He met with James Chen in a dim sum restaurant, with Roberto Santos at a boxing gym, gathering information and testing theories. Elena spent those days resting, regaining her strength, and trying to reconcile the life she was building with the life she'd lost. The penthouse felt less foreign now, more like a home than a museum of their failed marriage. She filled the empty closet slowly with comfortable clothes rather than designer labels, building a wardrobe that reflected who she was now rather than who she'd been. The doctor visits became routine, weekly checkups, ultrasounds that showed their daughter growing healthy and strong despite the rough start. Luca came to every appointment, holding Elena's hand while they listened to the rapid flutter of their child's heartbeat. "She's strong," the doctor said during one visit, moving the ultrasound wand across Elena's gel-covered belly. "Good size, good positioning? You're doing everything right, Mrs. Moretti." Elena didn't correct the name. Somewhere in the past week, she'd stopped thinking of herself as Elena Rossi and started being Elena Moretti again, even without the legal paperwork to prove it. On the fourth day, Luca came home from a meeting with an expression Elena had learned to recognize. He'd made a decision. "Teresa was telling the truth," he said, finding her in the living room with a book she'd been pretending to read. "Chen and Santos are both on board with the restructuring. They've been discussing it quietly for weeks, waiting for the right opportunity to propose it. And Vincent? Doesn't know yet, but he will soon. Teresa's calling a full council meeting for tomorrow night." Luca sat beside her on the couch. "She wants me there. Wants me to publicly endorse the new structure, give a speech about peaceful transition of power and the future of the organization." "Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to just walk away, let them figure it out without me. But the other part..." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "The other part knows that if I don't show up, if I don't put my weight behind this transition, there's going to be blood. Vincent won't accept losing power without a fight, and Marcus will feel obligated to defend his father's position." Elena closed her book and turned to face him fully. "So you're not choosing between your family and the empire. You're choosing how to leave the empire in a way that doesn't destroy it." "Exactly. But Elena, if I go to this meeting, if I make this speech, I'm going to become a target. Vincent will see it as a betrayal, as me siding with Teresa and the others against him. He might retaliate. Against you or against us? Both, potentially, which is why I need to know if you're comfortable with me doing this, because it puts you at risk, puts our daughter at risk. And I promised I wouldn't make decisions about our safety without including you." Elena stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city that had been both her home and her prison. Somewhere down there, Vincent Calabrese was planning his response to Marcus's defection. Somewhere down there, young men with guns and ambitions were choosing sides in a conflict that had nothing to do with right or wrong, and everything to do with power. "What happens if you don't go to the meeting?" she asked. "Teresa proceeds without me. The restructuring happens anyway, but it's weaker, more vulnerable to challenge, higher likelihood of violence. And if you do go? The restructuring is legitimized, has a better chance of success, but Vincent becomes my enemy, and that's..." Luca hesitated. "That's dangerous, Elena. He's old school, believes in blood feuds and generational vengeance. If he decides to come after me, he won't stop until one of us is dead." Elena turned to face him. "Tell me honestly, if I wasn't pregnant, if you didn't have a child to consider, what would you do?" "I'd go to the meeting, I'd make the speech. I'd do everything possible to ensure a peaceful transition because that's what's right." "Then that's what you should do now." "Elena, I'm not finished." She moved back to the couch, sitting close enough that their knees touched. "You've spent the past week trying to protect me by including me in decisions, which I appreciate. But Luca, at some point you have to trust that I understand the risks, and I'm choosing to face them anyway. Our daughter deserves to be born into a world where her father did the right thing, even when it was dangerous. She deserves to know that you chose integrity over fear. And if something happens to you because of that choice, then you make sure whoever comes after us regrets it for the rest of their very short life." Elena took his hand, pressing it against her belly where their daughter was growing. "But you also make sure our child knows her father was a man who stood for something, who tried to make his world better, even though it cost him." Luca stared at their joined hands, his thumb tracing slow circles on her stomach. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." He pulled her close, holding her with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about his capacity for violence. And Elena let herself believe, just for a moment, that love might actually be enough to protect them from what was coming. The council meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock at the Bellingham Hotel, the same location where Luca had secured protection for his family weeks earlier. This time, though, the atmosphere was different. Teresa had arranged for additional security, neutral parties who answered to no single family, ensuring that the meeting stayed civil. Luca wanted Elena to stay at the penthouse, protected by Victor and a team of guards. But she insisted on coming, on being present for this moment that would define their future. "If this goes wrong, I need to be there," she'd argued. "I need to see it happen so I understand what we're facing." So they arrived together, Elena in a simple black dress that accommodated her growing belly, Luca in the dark suit that made him look like a warrior going to battle. The hotel staff recognized them immediately, ushering them to the private conference room where the 5 families were gathering. The room fell silent when they entered. Vincent Calabrese sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. Marcus stood behind him, the bruises from his broken nose finally starting to fade. Teresa Giordano sat to Vincent's left, composed and confident. James Chen and Roberto Santos occupied the other positions, creating a tableau that looked like a Renaissance painting of power. "Moretti," Vincent said, his voice cold. "We weren't expecting you to bring your wife to a family council. She's part of my family. She has a right to understand what decisions are being made that affect our future." Luca pulled out a chair for Elena, then sat beside her. "Teresa said you wanted to discuss organizational restructuring." "Teresa has ideas above her station," Vincent replied. "This council has operated under established protocols for decades. We don't need to reinvent everything just because you've decided to play house." Elena felt Luca tense beside her, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. "The protocols worked when we had stable leadership and clear succession plans. But Vincent, you're 73 years old. Marcus is 26 and just proved he's not ready for the responsibility you want to give him. The organization needs a transition plan that doesn't involve another decade of waiting." "My son is more than capable." "Your son backed down from a strategic move because he was challenged," Vincent interrupted himself, then seemed to realize he was undermining his own argument. "He showed weakness." "He showed judgment," Teresa corrected. "He chose not to destroy medical supplies meant for innocent people." "That's not weakness, Vincent. That's leadership. Leadership is making hard choices, not bowing to sentiment. And hard choices sometimes mean admitting when the old ways aren't working anymore." Teresa opened a folder in front of her, distributing documents around the table. "This is a proposal for restructuring the 5 families into a council of equals. No single family dominates. No hereditary succession, just collective leadership based on merit and consensus." Vincent didn't even look at the document. "Absolutely not. My family has been part of this organization for 3 generations. I'm not handing over power to a committee." "You're not handing it over," James Chen interjected. "You're remaining part of it, just with checks and balances." "Vincent, you have to see that the alternative is war." Luca's walking away. The younger generation is restless, and half the organization thinks Marcus is either too weak or too volatile to lead. This restructuring is the only path forward that doesn't end in bloodshed. "Then let there be bloodshed," Vincent said flatly. "Better that than watching everything my father built get diluted by democracy." Elena had been quiet throughout the exchange, observing the dynamics, trying to understand the web of relationships and rivalries. But Vincent's casual dismissal of human life, his willingness to choose war over compromise, made her speak before she could think better of it. "How many people will die for your pride?" she asked. Every head turned toward her. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Mrs. Moretti." "It concerns everyone. You're talking about starting a war that will kill your own people, destroy businesses, probably drag in civilians who have nothing to do with any of this. And for what? Because you can't accept that the world has changed? You know nothing about our world. I know enough. I know that my husband spent 20 years building something, and when he decided to walk away for his family, he tried to do it responsibly. He didn't just abandon everyone and let chaos reign. He's trying to ensure a peaceful transition." Elena gestured to the document Teresa had distributed. This proposal gives you a way to maintain your legacy while adapting to new realities. Why would you choose violence over that? Because violence is what we understand. It's our language, our currency. You can't run an organization like this on committee votes and consensus building. Why not? Elena challenged. What's so sacred about the old ways that they're worth dying for? Vincent stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit here and be lectured by someone who knows nothing about what we've built. Then walk away, Teresa said calmly. No one's forcing you to stay, Vincent, but understand that this restructuring is happening with or without you. The question is whether you want to be part of shaping the future or whether you want to be remembered as the old man who couldn't adapt. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of decades of tradition and violence pressing down on the room. Marcus cleared his throat. Father, maybe we should consider— Be quiet, Vincent snapped. You've embarrassed me enough. I haven't embarrassed you. I made a choice based on what I thought was right. Isn't that what you always taught me? To think strategically, to consider long-term consequences? I taught you to be strong, to never show weakness to our enemies. Luca Moretti isn't our enemy, Marcus said quietly. He never was. You made him one because you saw his success as a threat to our family's position. But Father, he's walking away. He's offering us a path forward that doesn't require more blood. Why can't you see that as an opportunity instead of an insult? Vincent stared at his son, and Elena could see the moment something broke between them. Some fundamental understanding of what their relationship was supposed to be. You're choosing them over me, Vincent said. I'm choosing survival over pride. There's a difference. Vincent looked around the table, taking in the faces of the other family heads, reading the writing on the wall. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and out of time. You'll regret this, he said finally, his voice hollow. All of you. When this committee of yours falls apart, when the infighting starts and the organization crumbles, you'll wish you'd maintained the old ways. He walked out without another word, the door closing behind him with an almost gentle click. Marcus remained standing, looking lost and somehow younger, despite his 26 years. I'm sorry, he's not usually like this. He's exactly like this, Teresa said kindly. He's just never had to face the consequences before. Marcus, you have a choice to make. You can follow your father out that door and maintain family loyalty, or you can stay here and be part of building something new. Marcus looked at the door, then at the council members, then finally at Luca. What would you do? Luca considered the question carefully. I'd ask myself what kind of leader I want to be, the kind who follows tradition blindly or the kind who adapts when the world changes. There's no wrong answer, Marcus, but there are consequences either way. Elena watched Marcus struggle with the decision, saw the weight of family expectations warring with his own instincts. She understood that feeling. She'd faced similar choices when she married Luca, when she'd stayed with him despite her parents' disapproval, when she'd agreed to return to him after everything that had happened. I'll stay, Marcus said finally. Not because I'm disloyal to my father, but because I think this is right. The organization needs to evolve, and I want to be part of that evolution. Teresa nodded, respect clear in her expression. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 2 hours hammering out details. Territories would be redistributed, operations would be overseen by the council collectively, and decisions would require majority vote rather than unilateral authority. It was revolutionary by the standards of their world, and Elena could see the fear and excitement in equal measure as the council members realized what they were building. Luca contributed to the discussion, offering insights about logistics and potential challenges, but he made it clear he wasn't interested in being part of the new structure. My role ends tonight, he said when Teresa tried to offer him a position on the council. I've done what I came to do, help ensure a peaceful transition. The rest is up to you. On the drive home, Elena sat close to Luca in the back of the car, exhausted but oddly hopeful. You did it, she said quietly. You walked away. We did it. You standing up to Vincent, calling him out on his willingness to choose violence over compromise. That mattered, Elena. It showed Marcus and the others that there's another way. I was terrified the entire time. I know, but you did it anyway. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You're braver than you think." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the danger had passed, and they could finally start building the life Luca had promised. But she couldn't shake the memory of Vincent's face as he'd left that meeting, the cold fury in his eyes. Men like Vincent Calabrese didn't forgive betrayal, and they certainly didn't forget. Elena's instincts proved correct 3 weeks later. She was 7 months pregnant by then, her body finally recovering from the months of malnutrition, the baby growing strong and active. The penthouse had transformed into something resembling a home, photographs on the walls, books scattered across surfaces. The nursery slowly taking shape with furniture Luca insisted on assembling himself despite having no idea what he was doing. They'd fallen into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Luca worked from home most days, handling the legitimate business interests he'd maintained separate from the criminal enterprise. Elena spent her mornings reading, her afternoons walking through the city with Victor trailing at a respectful distance, her evenings cooking dinner with Luca in the massive kitchen that had sat unused for months. It was the closest thing to peace either of them had known in years. The call came at 2 in the morning. Elena woke to Luca's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand, his body going rigid beside her as he answered. "What happened?" His voice was sharp, instantly alert despite the hour. Elena couldn't hear the response, but she saw Luca's face change, saw something dark and cold settle into his expression. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "Luca?" Elena pushed herself up, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "What's wrong?" Vincent made his move. He hit the Porter Street warehouse, the one Marcus spared, burned it to the ground an hour ago. 3 security guards are dead. Elena's blood turned to ice. The medical supplies? Gone. All of it. $10 million in inventory, medication meant for free clinics across the city. Just gone. Luca stood, already reaching for his clothes. But that's not the worst part. Vincent left a message, said this was a demonstration of what happens to traitors and their families. Their families. Elena's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "Luca, he's threatening us? He's threatening everyone who sided with the restructuring. Teresa, Chen, Santos, but mostly me. Because I was the one who legitimized the new council, who gave my blessing to the change." Luca pulled on his shirt with sharp, angry movements. "Vincent wants war, and he's making sure I can't walk away from it." "What are you going to do?" Luca looked at her, and for a moment she saw the man he used to be, the enforcer, the boss, the monster who'd built an empire on fear. Then his expression softened, and he crossed to the bed, kneeling beside it so they were eye level. "I'm going to make sure you're safe. Victor's already coordinating additional security for the penthouse. I'm moving you somewhere else, somewhere Vincent can't find you." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Elena intended. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding while you deal with this alone." "Elena, 3 men are dead. Vincent is escalating, and the next target could be you or our daughter. I can't—" His voice cracked slightly. "I can't risk losing you. Not again." "Then don't push me away. Include me like you promised." Elena took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We handle this together, Luca. Whatever comes next, we face it as a family. You don't understand what you're asking. If I go after Vincent, if I respond to this with the kind of force it demands, I become everything I've been trying to leave behind. The violence, the bloodshed, the endless cycle of revenge. Our daughter will be born into that world. Our daughter will be born into whatever world we create for her. But she deserves a father who protects his family and a mother who stands beside him while he does it." Elena's voice was steady despite her fear. "You've been trying so hard to be a different man, to walk away from violence. But Luca, some battles you can't avoid. Some threats require you to be exactly who you were. The question is whether you can do that without losing yourself completely." He stared at her, and she could see him struggling with the decision. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but you stay here, surrounded by security. You don't leave this building without Victor and at least 4 guards. And if anything happens, if I tell you to run, you do it without question. Agreed?" "Agreed." Luca kissed her forehead, then stood and finished dressing. Elena watched him transform before her eyes. The gentle man who assembled nursery furniture becoming the crime boss who'd once controlled half the city. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of relief. This was who he really was, had always been. The violence and the tenderness weren't separate people. They were both part of the man she'd married. After he left, Elena couldn't sleep. She moved to the living room, staring out at the city lights while her daughter kicked restlessly inside her. Somewhere out there, Vincent Calabrese was planning his next move. And somewhere else, Luca was planning his response. The sun was rising when Luca returned, his suit rumpled but his face calm. Elena had dozed off on the couch, and she woke to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What happened?" she asked. "I met with Teresa and the others. We've agreed on a coordinated response. Vincent violated the council's authority by acting unilaterally, so he's being formally expelled from the organization. All his territories, all his operations, everything goes to Marcus." "Marcus is taking over his father's empire?" "With council oversight, yes. The kid's not ready for full leadership, but he's got good instincts and he's willing to learn. More importantly, he understands that what his father did was wrong." Luca sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap and massaging them absently. But Vincent isn't going to accept exile quietly. He's going to fight back, probably violently, which means we need to be prepared. Prepared how? I've called in every favor I'm owed, activated every contact I still have. As of this morning, there are 50 men watching this building and another 100 spread throughout the city keeping eyes on Vincent's movements. If he so much as looks in your direction, I'll know about it. Elena studied his face, seeing the exhaustion beneath the determination. "You're not sleeping." "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that warehouse burning. I see those 3 guards who died because they were protecting something I valued. I see Vincent's message written in smoke and blood. It's not your fault, isn't it? I walked away from the organization, created a power vacuum, and then came back just long enough to support a restructuring that Vincent saw as a betrayal. Every choice I made led to this moment." "Every choice you made was trying to build something better," Elena corrected. "You can't control Vincent's response to that. You can only control your own actions." "Then I'm choosing to end this, permanently." Luca's voice was cold, final. "Vincent threatened my family. That's a line you don't cross and survive." "Luca, I know what I said about trying to be better, about walking away from violence. But Elena, some men only understand one language, and Vincent Calabrese is fluent in blood." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to find some path forward that didn't end in more death. But she'd seen Vincent at that council meeting, had heard the casual way he dismissed human life. Men like that didn't change, didn't compromise, didn't stop until they were forced to. "What's your plan?" she asked quietly. "Better you don't know the details. But it'll be clean, quick, and it'll send a message that my family is untouchable. After that, I'm done. Completely. The organization can handle Vincent's remaining loyalists without me." The next 48 hours were tense, filled with whispered phone calls and security briefings. Elena tried to maintain normalcy, reading, eating the meals Luca's chef prepared, talking to their daughter about the father she'd be born to. But fear sat like a stone in her chest. On the 3rd day, Victor arrived at the penthouse with news. "Vincent's planning something for tonight. We've got intel that he's gathering his remaining crew, maybe 20 guys, and they're moving toward the financial district." "Teresa's territory," Luca said immediately. "He's going after her to prove the council can't protect its own." "That's what we think. But boss, this could also be bait. He might be trying to draw you out." "Probably, but I can't let him kill Teresa to make a point about me." Luca turned to Elena. "I have to go." "I know. If this goes wrong, it won't." Elena stood and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "You're going to go? You're going to end this threat to our family? And then you're going to come home to me. That's what's going to happen." He pulled her close as her pregnant belly would allow, and held her like he was memorizing the feeling. "I love you," he whispered. "I should have told you that every single day of our marriage. I should have made sure you never doubted it." "Tell me when you get back," Elena said, pulling away to look at him. "Tell me when this is over and we're safe. Tell me every day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her then, soft and desperate, a promise and a prayer all at once. Then he was gone, Victor and Marco and a team of armed men following him into the night. Elena returned to the windows, watching the city lights blur through her tears. She'd sent the man she loved into danger, had encouraged him to be the monster he'd been trying to leave behind. The question was whether that monster would consume him completely, or whether he'd find his way back to the man who assembled nursery furniture and held her hand during ultrasounds. The wait was endless. Elena paced the penthouse, her daughter kicking in agitation, feeling every minute stretch into hours. She tried calling Luca, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried Victor with the same result. Finally, at 11 o'clock, her phone rang. "Luca?" She answered without checking the caller ID. "It's Teresa." The woman's voice was shaken but alive. "I wanted to let you know. Vincent's dead." Luca stopped him before he could reach my building. There was a confrontation, shots were fired, and Vincent didn't survive. Elena sat down heavily, relief and horror washing over her in equal measure. "And Luca, is he—" "He's fine, physically, anyway. But Elena, he killed Vincent himself. Not his men, not in the chaos of a firefight." He walked up to Vincent and put him down like he was putting down a rabid dog. Teresa paused. "Your husband is one of the most frightening men I've ever known, but he's also one of the most loyal. He did what he had to do to protect his family. Where is he now?" "On his way back to you. I just wanted to call first to prepare you. He's not in a good place right now. Killing someone changes you, even when it's necessary." After Teresa hung up, Elena stood at the windows and waited. She understood what the other woman meant. Luca had crossed back into the darkness he'd been trying to escape, had become the monster one more time. The question was whether he'd be able to find his way back out. He arrived home just after midnight, moving through the penthouse like a ghost. Elena watched from the bedroom doorway as he poured himself a drink with shaking hands, his suit jacket discarded, his white shirt stained with what might have been blood. "Luca." He looked up at her voice, and she saw the emptiness in his eyes, the cost of what he'd done. "It's over," he said flatly. "Vincent's dead. His crew scattered. The council is secure. You're safe. Come here." Elena held out her hand. He crossed to her slowly, and she led him to the bathroom. Without speaking, she started filling the bathtub, the same one she used to fall asleep in, the one he'd pulled her from all those years ago. "Get undressed," she said gently. He complied mechanically, and she saw the bruises forming on his ribs, the cuts on his knuckles. Evidence of violence she'd sent him to commit. When the tub was full, she helped him into the water, then knelt beside it fully clothed. "You did what you had to do," she said quietly. "You protected our family. You kept us safe." "I killed a man, Elena. I looked Vincent Calabrese in the eyes, and I shot him. I chose to become exactly what I've been trying to escape. For one night. For one necessary act of protection. That doesn't erase all the work you've done to be better." She reached for his hand, wet and trembling. "You're not a monster, Luca. You're a man who's capable of monstrous things when the people he loves are threatened. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because I didn't feel anything when I pulled that trigger. No remorse, no hesitation. Just cold satisfaction that he'd never threaten you again." "Good." Elena's voice was fierce. "I'm glad you felt that. I'm glad you protected us without hesitation. Because, Luca, I need you alive. Our daughter needs you alive. And if being capable of violence is what keeps you here with us, then I can live with that." He stared at her, water dripping from his hair, and something in his expression finally cracked. The tears came then, harsh and painful. Years of violence and guilt and fear pouring out in the safety of this bathroom with this woman who'd somehow learned to love all of him. The darkness and the light, the monster and the man. Elena held him while he broke, her dress soaking through, her daughter kicking between them. And when the tears finally stopped, when Luca had purged the worst of the poison from his system, she helped him out of the tub and into bed. "Sleep," she whispered, curling against him. "Tomorrow we start building the life you promised me." He slept for 14 hours straight, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Elena woke periodically to check on him, to make sure he was still breathing, still there. When he finally woke, the sun was setting and the city was bathed in orange light. He found her in the nursery, putting away tiny clothes they'd bought the week before. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." He moved to stand beside her, looking at the crib he'd assembled, the changing table, the rocking chair where Elena planned to feed their daughter. "It's really happening, isn't it? We're going to be parents." "In about 8 weeks, yes." Luca was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on Elena's belly. "I want to leave the city." She turned to face him. "What?" "Not forever. But I think we need distance, at least for a while. Somewhere away from the organization, from the memories, from everything that's happened." He met her eyes. "I found a place last month before all of this with Vincent escalated. It's in the mountains, about 3 hours north. Private estate, fully secured, completely isolated. I was thinking we could go there for the rest of your pregnancy, have the baby there, and just exist as a family without all of this." "You want to run away?" "I want to start over. There's a difference." Luca turned her to face him fully. "Elena, I meant what I said about being done with this world. Vincent was the last threat, the last loose end. The council is stable now. Marcus has stepped into his father's role with Teresa's guidance, and there's nothing left that requires my involvement. I can finally walk away completely." "And you think distance will make that easier?" "I think distance will give us a chance to figure out who we are without the Empire defining us. To learn how to be parents without the weight of my past hanging over everything." Elena considered this, her hand resting over his on her belly. The idea of leaving the city, of retreating to somewhere safe and isolated, was appealing in ways she hadn't expected. Here, every street corner held memories of their courtship, their marriage, her desperate months alone. A fresh start in a place untouched by their history might be exactly what they needed. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll go to the mountains. We'll have our daughter there. But Luca, eventually we'll need to come back. This is our city. We can't hide from it forever." "Not hiding. Just taking time to heal." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Say you'll marry me again. Once the baby's born, once we've had time to build something real between us. Marry me properly this time. Not because we're caught up in passion or trying to prove something to our families. Marry me because you choose me, knowing everything I am and everything I've done." "Ask me again in 8 weeks, Elena said, echoing her earlier promise. "After our daughter is born, after you've proven you can be the father you want to be. Ask me then, and I'll give you my answer." The mountain estate was everything Luca had promised, a sprawling property surrounded by pine forests, with views that stretched for miles. The main house was modern but warm, all wood and stone and floor-to-ceiling windows. There was a medical suite equipped for childbirth, a nursery that made the penthouse version look modest, and enough security to withstand a small army. They moved there a week later, bringing only what they needed. Victor and 2 other guards came with them, though they stayed in a separate building on the property, giving Luca and Elena the privacy they craved. The weeks that followed were the most peaceful either of them had known. They spent mornings walking the grounds, afternoons reading in the library, evenings cooking together and talking about their daughter. What they'd name her, what kind of person they hoped she'd become, what stories they'd tell her about how her parents found their way back to each other. Elena's body continued to heal, to strengthen. The mountains agreed with her, the clean air and fresh food and absence of stress working miracles. By the time her 8th month rolled around, she looked healthy and radiant, glowing with the kind of contentment she'd thought she'd never feel again. Luca transformed too. Away from the city and the constant reminders of his past, he became softer, more present. He read books on parenting, practiced diaper changes on a doll the estate's housekeeper had provided, and talked to Elena's belly every night, telling their daughter about the world she'd be born